Hello there everyone, my name is Jeff and I'm here on behalf of Spore Harvest to tell you that this story contains sexual scenes and or gore. If you are disturbed by any of these things, you should click off the video now. Okay then, the rest of you, come right in, enjoy the show.
Fallen, written by Patrick12345. Chapter 3. Let's try it. I'm going to need more underwear. Ark chuckled as he slipped his pants on. Only in public. Twilight laughed. If only the house wasn't also a library. He stopped and started laughing. What? She asked. Spike left the door open when he ran out. He said, his laughter slowing down. Twilight's face reddened slightly. Oh God, she mumbled. Hey, it's not like many people could have heard it, Ark said as he grabbed her hand. And you've got to admit, it's a little more thrilling when there's the chance someone can hear it going on. Twilight gave a small smile and shook her head. You just love hearing me scream, she joked. I love just being able to touch you. He smiled. He squeezed her hand a little. The feeling's mutual, she said, running a hand along his cheek. He leaned forward and planted a kiss on her lips. I'd suggest that before we tear apart the rest of my clothing, let's at least go say hi to your brother and his wife, he said. Yeah, it wouldn't be the best of manners to lug you around without any clothes on a leash like my own personal breeding hound. She laughed. He took a sharp breath in. Okay, then, he said. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go. She smiled. Just one question before we go, he said. Sure, she said. How many boyfriends have you had before me? He asked. Besides you, about 0, she said. And now the only one you'll ever need, he smiled. How did you get so perfect? She asked, wrapping her arms around him. I don't know. How did I find the perfect woman? He asked, pressing his lips to hers. How many girlfriends have you had? She asked after pulling away. Ark choked a little and mumbled something that sounded like I lost count. Twilight just stared at him. He sighed. Okay, most lasted less than a week, he said, looking down at the ground. And really, most of them wanted me because of where I stood. What do you mean? She asked. He took in a deep breath. Back where I was before, I was the next in line for the throne, he said. And he sighed again. Can we sit down? Twilight nodded and guided him to the bed. My family had been ruling for generations, but that's not how I ended up where I am now, disgraced, haunted by the people I once swore to serve, and without a family, he said. My father went from being kind and just to being tyrannical, evil and cruel, all because a group assassinated my mother. That went on for 3 years before the rebellion started, and they executed anyone even related to my father. He paused for a moment and she could see he was crying. No one was spared and I was left alone, hunted down like a rabid dog, and almost killed. His hand shook a little. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, and my closest and last friend sacrificed himself so I could escape my death, even if it was just for a moment. Tears were streaming down his face. Twilight could feel her own tears falling down her face. She wrapped her arms around him and cradled him without a word. And when I hit the ground, I thought I was going to die, he stammered. Stop, she said. But you saved me, so many ways, and he said quietly, and you didn't even know me or know what I was. I know you now, and I know I'll never, ever let you go, she said, hugging him tighter. You're all I have now, he said quietly, looking up at her. You're all I want, she said. He hugged her. I can tell you my life would be meaningless and empty without you, he said, burying his face into her shoulder. I love you so much, Ark. I won't ever leave you. I promise, she said, pressing her face into his hair as more tears slid from her eyes. I can't even begin to tell you how much I love you, Ark said, his grip on her tightening a little more. You know, earlier, when you said your other girlfriends and why they were with you, she asked. Yeah? He asked quietly. I don't care about any of it. I don't love you because of your blood or any of that. I want you and only you. Never give me any more than just that, she said. Then I'll give you all that I have now. My body, my heart, and my soul, he said. Well, that's only fair, since you already have mine. She smiled. He looked up at her and smiled back. Twilight? He asked. Yeah? She said. Can we just hold each other for a little bit longer? He asked. I'd like that. She nodded. I think it's great that me and your sister are going to be able to spend some time together. It's been forever. Caden smiled. I know, it's just been so hard to get some time off, Shining said, returning the smile. They walked up to Twilight's door. He reached forward and knocked on it. Spike opened the door and stared at the two of them, seeming almost out of it. Spike? Cadence asked cringingly. Spike blinked a few times and stepped back, still silent. Spike, did something happen? Shining asked. Spike nodded. What? Cadence questioned, both suspiciously and hesitantly. Bedroom, screaming, walked in, Spike mumbled. Is Twilight mad at you? Shining asked. Spike shook his head. Shining looked at Cadence, seeming a little confused. Cadence walked in, past Spike, and immediately heard moaning in the bedroom. She walked up the stairs and approached the door. Yeah, do it harder, Twilight sighed. She peeked into the room, saw Twilight laying naked on her bed while a complete stranger was beside her, massaging her back. As you wish, the man said, pressing harder into Twilight's back. Anything else? Am I interrupting? Cadence asked into the room. The man froze up and remained silent. Twilight's head snapped to the door and a wide smile grew on her face. Cadence! She said excitedly, rushing over and hugging her. It's good to see you too, Twilight. Cadence giggled. Ark, come over here and meet the best sister-in-law ever! Twilight said, looking back at Ark. Her expression faded slowly to a blank one when she remembered he was naked. It was shortly after that she realized she was still naked. Her face turned bright red almost immediately. I see you two are dating. Unfortunately, I'm only familiar with half of the people I'm looking at. Cadence joked. Ark looked back for a moment before managing to cover himself up. Yes, there's a reason for that, he said quickly. There was the sound of footsteps walking up the stairs. Oh, don't worry, Cadence laughed. I'm not a prude. The things I've let your brother do to me. Why would you? Shining mumbled from outside the room. Yes, and the things I'd let you do to me, Ark mumbled, quietly glancing up at Twilight. Shining glanced at Cadence as he entered the room. He froze when he saw Ark. He then glared at Ark. Oh, lighten up, honey. I'm sure not every boyfriend or a family member is a malevolent changeling queen. That's one thing that doesn't run in the family. I hope. Cadence laughed. Oh gods, those children nappers exist here too? Ark sighed as he fell back. I was hoping I left more of the bad things behind. They did what? Cadence snapped in shock. Changelings don't kidnap children, do they? Shining asked. Well, the ones I'm used to steal the child and replace them, usually with ill results. Ark said. You're not from around here, are you? Cadence asked almost rhetorically, observing the non-pony-esque man. No, Ark said. Though I do feel that I belong here more than my own world. He smiled as he looked at Twilight. Twilight smiled back and kissed him. You couldn't have dated a pony? Shining asked. Ark pulled Twilight back down on top of him and held the kiss for a little bit longer. Shining? Cadence said bluntly, giving him a disapproving stare. Sorry, it's just all of my experiences with races I haven't even heard of before have been bad. Shining said with a sigh. Right, I'll let you go ahead and be the one to say how horrible he is for being different, or were you going to try a different form of prejudice? Cadence asked in a sarcastic, curious tone, staring intently at Shining. All right. Shining sighed. Ark pulled back from the kiss and pulled Twilight under the blankets and against his bare skin. There, that's much better. He smiled, hugging her a little tighter. And I don't mind being called out as different. It's what I am. Why hide it? You're definitely not hiding anything. Twilight giggled quietly, gently stroking his dick as she kissed him. How long have you two been dating? Shining asked. They broke the kiss at the same time. About 4 hours now. They both said as if it wasn't an important fact. 4 hours. Shining repeated in disbelief. Are you sure that's not how long you've been going at it? Cadence questioned. Well, we got out of the shower about 20 minutes ago. He squeezed Twilight a little more. Though I wouldn't mind picking up where we left off. He whispered. Why don't me and Shiny leave you two alone? Cadence smiled. Ark was doing something under the blanket. Twilight gave a quiet grunt. Yes, do that, she said, seeming that the question Cadence was asking wasn't the one she was answering. Ark kissed her, and both Cadence and Shining heard the wet schlick as he hilded himself in Twilight. Oh, God. Shining sighed. Oh, sweetie, Cadence said, wrapping her arms tenderly around Shining. The bed underneath Twilight and Ark started to bounce a little as Ark thrust roughly up into Twilight. How can someone change my sister like this in the span of 4 hours? Shining asked himself. The same way I change you by doing this, Cadence said, sliding a hand into his pants, and immediate heat radiating from it as she wrapped it around his package. Twilight made a half-choked moan as she pulled away from the kiss. Oh God, smash it open! She screamed. Twi, what are you... Shining was cut off by the loud sound of part of the bed cracking under the force of Ark's latest thrust. It hurts so good, Twilight moaned shakily. Shining chewed on his lip and shivered a little as he gave in to Cadence's touch. That's better. Now let's go downstairs. Cadence cooed softly, sliding her hand out of his pants and switching it to his own hand, gently pulling him towards the doorway. I'm going to fucking break you, Ark grunted. Break me in half, Twilight screamed. Ark tore out of Twilight and in one swift motion shoved his dick into her unprepared ass. Twilight's eyes widened and her whole body tensed up. What the fuck? She screamed. Ark's hand shot up to her head and he pulled her back down into a kiss. His thrusting had slowed and became softer. Twilight grunted softly and slowly started to loosen up, moaning into his mouth. Ark let her pull away from the kiss and wrapped his arms around her. Fuck, this feels good, he grunted. I can't feel... Mm. Twilight sputtered. Sorry, he said. I couldn't, just got lost. He mumbled. Her chest was heaving in and out with pained breath. Hurts really bad, she groaned. Ark pulled her in close and hugged her. Okay, let me pull out, he said quietly, kissing her forehead. He slowly started pulling his cock out of her ass. Twilight stopped him. No, just let it sit for a moment, she said. He nodded and stopped moving, his arms still wrapped around her. A few fresh tears had settled by his eyes. What's wrong? Is it too tight? I can get off, she said quickly. No, I thought I had really hurt you badly, he said quietly. Twilight put a hand on his cheek. I'm fine, she smiled. Ark smiled back. I'm glad you are. I wouldn't have been able to forgive myself if you weren't, he said. He pulled her head down against his chest and kissed the tip of her nose. I'm sure you'd find a way, she said, slowly moving her hips around. He moaned softly and started slowly thrusting in and out of her. After this, I'll be taking care of you, even if you don't need me to. He smiled. Sounds great, Twilight grunted, tightening slightly around him. If I was all the way in, I think you're trying to crush my dick, he joked. His thrusting was forced to get harder in order to combat her tightness. Twilight seemed to be straining. I think, she mumbled. He slowed down slightly. What's wrong? He asked. Twilight shook for a moment before her whole body relaxed. Oh, fuck yeah, she moaned, her mouth falling open wide and her tongue falling out. Ark smiled and steadily increased the speed of his thrusts. Yes, squeeze harder, make it harder to thrust, he moaned. So fucking good, Twilight slurred, tightening as if on command. Ark moaned louder and started getting a little rougher with each thrust. Suddenly, he smirked and stopped thrusting, letting Twilight slide down to his base. His hands pressed down on her hips, preventing her from moving very much. What? Stop, don't, she mumbled. Shh, just wait, he moaned. Twilight stared down at him, panting, her breath getting almost impatient. There, he grunted. His smirk returned as he looked up at her. This will make it a lot better. He shifted his hips around a little before lifting Twilight slowly off of his cock and holding her above his tip for a moment. Huh? She mumbled uncertainly. He dropped her, causing his dick to pave straight through her ass again. Her head fell back immediately, her eyes straining open wide as she screamed. Ark started to thrust up, bouncing her a little with every thrust. He started babbling something unintelligible as she was so freely tossed around. His breath turned into heavy pants as he drew closer to his orgasm. Get ready, he moaned. Her pussy spasmed violently, causing her eyes to tighten to the point where he couldn't thrust any more, trapping him hilted into her. Slip and get, she shouted with an audible choking noise. He exploded into her ass. His cum flooded into her and after a few moments began to overflow and started going further into her body. Fuck, yes, he sighed as his head fell back. Twilight's whole body froze as she felt both their orgasms pass through her. Ark pulled her head down and kissed her. His cum continued flowing freely into her ass, some managing to slip past his dick and had begun to drip out of her ass. I can't believe how good this orgasm feels, he moaned. Yes, pump me full, she moaned quietly. He smiled weakly. Whatever you want, he said. 10 minutes later. Twilight's stomach had expanded outward a little bit from the amount of cum Ark had pumped into her ass. I may have overdid it, he said quietly. Twilight's face had twisted into a blissful peace. No, it's perfect, she said in a half-drunk manner. Well, let's see how much. He started, pressing the tip of his slightly erect cock to her pussy. It takes to make it real. Twilight's expression quickly changed back to normal. Wait a minute, she said quickly. He kissed her and pulled his dick back. I thought you had something to say about that, he said with a small sigh. Well, if you're tired, all right. We should probably get downstairs. Shouldn't keep them waiting any longer. Twilight sighed. Give me another half an hour. The last orgasm drained me, Ark said, wrapping his arms around her. I can wait. She smiled, nuzzling herself against his chest. Finally, we get some story out of this story. Well, if you like this chapter, hit that like button and subscribe, and that's basically all. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!